G'day, Grant from Colac-Otway Sports Treatment Clinic here, and hello to everyone at AKD. I just want to take this opportunity to provide some information about wrist, forearm and elbow pain, some of the things that you can do for yourself to help alleviate that pain or possibly even prevent that pain, and particularly some stretches that might be useful in doing that. Now, obviously, this video is mostly directed to the guys on the floor who are handling timber all day, but it could just as easily apply to people who are working in the admin office who spend a lot of time with their hands in that position and are always typing. It's quite prevalent to get wrist, forearm and elbow pain in people who sit at a desk all day and type and use mouses as part of their job. But especially for those guys on the floor who are handling timber all day, obviously timber handling timber is a very unique sort of job. The forces involved in handling timber can actually get very, very high. I mean, I've got my little piece of stump timber here that I brought from home, which is very, very light, but the lever, the length of the timber obviously will dictate to a certain degree how much force is involved and how hard your forearms are going to work. There's so much of that repetitive type of movement at the wrist. There's a lot of that rotation of the forearms, okay? Levering, flipping, twisting and dragging are all going to require fairly significant grip strength, but also a reasonably high amount of strength and stability and mobility at the wrist in order to achieve it, okay? It's one of the reasons why during manual handling training we keep talking about the role of your legs in being able to move the timber, okay? Obviously, you can create a lot more leverage with your legs doing that kind of thing. It's a lot less stressful on your forearms than having to do that, okay? Moving it side to side to, lever and untangle boards, getting into that side lunge position or that squat position so you can move from side to side makes it much easier, creates a lot more momentum, and therefore takes a lot of the stress off your forearms. But if you're doing it for hours on end each day, then your forearms are likely to get sore and a bit stressed, okay? So let's just talk about some of the basic stretches. These muscles down the front of the forearm will get very, very tight with all that gripping, okay? So this is the simplest stretch to start off with. Take the arm out in front of you, make sure you fully extend at the elbow, and use your other hand to pull the fingers down and back like that. Okay, can we see that? All right. Hold your stretches for 20 to 30 seconds at a time. Stretches shouldn't hurt, but there will likely be a little bit of discomfort, a bit of that stretching discomfort associated with it, and that stretching discomfort is okay. It means that the tissues are stretching a little bit, but pain is not something that we want, okay? All right. Now, the other aspect of this stretch that I want to talk about is where the fingers actually point. It's quite easy to end up in that position when you stretch, but there are muscles in the forearm that do a lot of that motion that also need a good stretch as well. So that means that the fingers ideally would point down, not out to the side and not up. Okay, so if you have trouble getting your hand into that position, okay, you may need to start there or you may need to start there and do it like that instead. But I think ideally you would get your arms or your hands facing down that way so that you can get all of those long muscles, but also those rotating muscles, the chance to stretch as well, okay? The muscles on the top side of your arm are the ones that insert into the outside of the elbow here. Tightness in those muscles will often lead to that tennis elbow type pain that is reasonably prevalent at AKD. The opposite stretch applies, okay? So fingers go down, elbow straight, and pull down like that, okay? You can even get a little bit of an extra stretch if you curl the fingers under a little bit you get those long finger tendons and muscle stretching as well. Okay, so they're the two basic stretches that I think are really important. But if you want to get more stretch out of those muscles and more mobility in the wrist, you then have to put a little bit more load through it. And I often ask people to do those similar stretches on a bench or a table. Okay, so I try to get my fingers facing backwards like that when I do this stretch, elbow straight. Okay, if you can do one hand at a time in that position, that's great, but if you can get two hands in that position, then it basically forces you to stay in a square position when you stretch. It's very easy to tell yourself that your fingers are facing that way and then do that, okay? Or, sorry, if I face towards the camera, okay? Okay, really you want to stay square onto where you're stretching, okay? So fingers facing back towards you, like that, okay? Take the elbows out, and then to increase the stretch, you just lean your body weight back very gently. Okay, you don't want to go too hard on this one. You certainly don't want to bounce up and down on top of it because your wrists will not appreciate that. All right, you could even provide a little bit more leverage or a bit more force by putting your hands up against the wall, or even getting onto the floor into a 4-point kneeling position. Okay, so there's some options for you. I encourage regular stretching if you're going to be doing that manual handling type stuff every single day. I think getting into the habit of stretching every day, warm-ups, cool-downs, I think it's just essential. It's one of the basic things that you can do to help prevent injury. All right, thanks very much, and see you soon.